Okay, hello again, students. This very short video is sort of a follow-up on the PowerPoint presentation on the basics of academic writing and research, which emphasizes, among other things, how to incorporate research material into your paper so that even if you're using a great deal of research, as you will be in writing your investigative essay, you still maintain a strong voice in your essay, making sure that that your voice is dominant and that the research doesn't take over or is too dominant in your essay. And so the main purpose of this particular short video is just to show examples of some of the strategies that are used in academic writing in blending research smoothly into the paper. And this is one page I'm going to look at from the historical background section of a past student's paper on the Belize-Guatemala dispute. I'm not too concerned about you being overly influenced by this former student's paper. We're just going to look at 3 or 4 sample paragraphs. This particular student chose to use MLA style in his paper, and as you know, you have the option of choosing MLA or APA. Regardless of whether you're using MLA or APA, most of the moves or the strategies I'm going to be pointing out regarding the blending in of research information into the paper apply to MLA or APA and various other academic styles. Good. So we're going to look at the first few paragraphs of this student's historical background section of his paper. And so the first thing I want to point out here is that it is always a good idea to begin a paragraph with your own ideas and words, even when most of the information you're presenting in the paragraph is research information, right? This is one way to ensure that your voice is the dominant voice in your paper. Good. So here we have this student opening up his paragraph, and indeed this part of the paper in which he's presenting an outline of the historical background and progression of the Belize-Guatemala dispute. He starts out in his own voice. In this first sentence, right? So that's a very good practice that you'll want to emulate. In an essay like the one that you're writing, which is geared toward a general audience, many of whom might not be familiar with the sources you're citing or why you consider these sources to be credible sources, it is also advisable that when you introduce an author for the first time, that you use both the author's first name and last name. And also provide a brief credential, a brief professional little background information to indicate how this author is connected to or familiar with or qualified to be a source on this particular topic. So by stating that James Murphy is a former ambassador and representative to the OAS, Belize representative to the OAS, your reader or the reader of this paper can assume that he is knowledgeable on the topic, that Murphy is knowledgeable on the topic of the Belize-Guatemala dispute. And this indicates that the student, as a writer, has selected a reliable source. So that increases the student's ethos, the student's credibility as a researcher and a writer. So that's one advantage of naming and giving a little bit of credential on each of your source the first time you introduce that source, as the student does here. Bear in mind, however, that in some professional or academic fields, such as the sciences, education, and so on, last names alone are often used to introduce authors or to refer to authors in general. So be sure to find out from each of your instructors what style is preferred, not only in that course or in that field, but also for each particular paper that's assigned in that course. So moving along, next we'll notice that in this paragraph here, the writer adds an attributive phrase so that it is clear that he is continuing to quote the same James Murphy article as in the previous paragraph. Right? So it's good when you're using the same source from paragraph to paragraph. It is very helpful and advisable to repeat attributive phrases as often as is possible so that your readers are aware that when you move from one paragraph to the next, you are continuing to reference that same source. So this student does a good job of that when he adds an attribution right here. And then notice here in this parenthetical citation that although this is MLA again, as I noted earlier, although MLA requires both the author's last name and the page number for MLA in the parenthetical citation, in APA it's the author's last name, the publication year, and the page number. So even though this is MLA and ordinarily the page number would be presented here, we'll notice that the page number is left out. And that is because what the student is doing here is the student is summarizing a large chunk of information rather than using a direct quotation of a short little bit of text. So when you're summarizing a whole lot of information, there's really no need to place the page number. That's one of the standard rule. Good? All right. Notice also that you'll also notice that throughout the student's writing, the student varies his attributive phrases, both the wording of the attributive phrases and their location in the sentence. So in the paragraph above, the student writes, proposals from the mediator were rejected by both countries, explains Murphy. Good, as we see here. Proposals from the mediator, were rejected by both Belize and Guatemala, explains Murphy. So the attributive phrase is presented at the end of this paragraph, and he chooses the verb explains rather than repeating states or says over and over. And then in this example here, the attributive phrase is placed in the middle of the sentence. When the writer says between 1976 and 1981, Murphy tells us numerous discussions continued, etc., etc. So the attributive phrase is placed in the middle of the sentence. In other instances, it can be at the beginning, it can be at the end. So it's a good idea to vary not only a choice of attributive phrases, Murphy tells, Murphy explains, Murphy asserts, but also the location of the attributive phrases in the sentences to give your writing variety. Good. You'll notice also that the present tense is used for most of the attributive verbs in this outline of the historical information and the presentation of the research, which is a very common rule in academic writing when we're summarizing or reviewing a published source, such as an article, a book, a novel, a movie. However, when the source is a live presentation, such as a speech, lecture, press conference, conversation, personal interview, the past tense is usually used, right? So here, this James Murphy article is obviously a published source, and so the student uses the present tense in the attributive verbs when citing Murphy. However, again, there are exceptions to these rules of thumb, and you must consult with your instructor to find out which conventions are appropriate in the writing situation that you're currently working in. Good. Here, in citing a lecture by Cesar Ross, this student, you notice, uses the past tense this time. Not only that, but as historian Cesar Ross noted in a 2016 lecturer at the University of Belize, noted the attributive verb is in the past here because, as I mentioned earlier, it is a live source, a live presentation, and hence the past tense is used rather than the present tense, which is the standard in a lot of academic writing when you're summarizing printed or recorded or published information. Good. So so those are some of the common practices that I wanted to point out just to bring your attention to regarding the blending in of research information into your paper. I am going to post right below this video just this one sample page so that you can review at your own leisure some of the things that I have pointed out. Good. So thank you for your attention.